Mr. Mark Carney has announced a 10-year, $3.2 billion national food security strategy to change how food moves to Canadian consumers.
Despite our vast agricultural strengths, we continue to face some of the higher grocery costs than we should. So today we're pleased, very pleased, to announce that Canada is launching our first national food security strategy. There's more than $3 billion in this strategy of investment to tackle the challenges in our food system through targeted measures and investments to help create more affordable, sustainable, and resilient food supply chain in Canada. In other words, all the way across the supply chain. 4 key objectives, 4 pillars in this strategy. And the first is to increase grocery store competition, create more choice for Canadians. Second, process more food in Canada. Third, grow more fruits and vegetables all year round in Canada. And finally, lower prices by removing expensive regulatory barriers so farmers and producers can put more Canadian food on our shelves more easily.
Conservative MP Michael Barrett says the announcement doesn't hold much hope for struggling Canadians.
This year, in 2026, when Canadians are paying $1,000 more for groceries than they were last year, their questions for Mr. Carney and his government are simple. When will their grocery prices go down as a result of his announcement yesterday? And by how much will their grocery prices go down as a result of his announcement from yesterday? I didn't see that in the announcement. And this is what Canadians are left with when the cameras are turned off and when the Prime Minister leaves the grocery store. Canadians go into the store and they see ever rising prices.
So Eddie, let's break it all down. I'll tell you what, I'll do the 10-year plan, you do the immediate squeeze. So here's the plan. $3 billion national food security strategy, $1 billion to build independent supply hubs and bypass major monopolies, $750 million to scale domestic greenhouse and fruit veggie production. And the goal is to break reliance on foreign imports and level the playing field for local grocers. Over to you.
Indeed. And Gary, I like that last one, the goal that you just outlined. Now, the immediate squeeze is $1,000 projected increase to average grocery bills this year alone. Independent grocers are currently facing massive wholesale markups from competitors. And of course, that results in higher pricing. And the reality, infrastructure takes years to construct and hit supermarket shelves. And the question is, can struggling Canadian pocketbooks afford to wait a decade for relief?
You recall back in, was it the fall? When they were talking about the cost of groceries and there was trying to find some relief for Canadians? Or was it earlier this year? Anyway, it was late fall or earlier this year. Anyhow, we get into a discussion, and I suggested at the time that why are we not building greenhouses that are capable of growing all of our fruits and vegetables so we don't have to import them?
Correct. That was in the fall. I remember that.
Yeah. So, thank you. Here we are, and what's part of this strategy? And that is to work with the agricultural community and start building greenhouses where we can grow all of our own fruits and vegetables. And it makes a whole lot of sense. However, there is a slightly higher price tag associated with this because of the energy costs for the greenhouses.
Mm-hmm.
And the heating of the greenhouses in the winter, fall and winter, and early spring, which will lead to higher prices for your vegetables and your fruit. Now, I understand that, and I think that part of this, like let's get shovels in the ground right away and get these greenhouses started and work with farmers across the country, whether they form like their own co-ops or whatever the business model is. Let's get these greenhouses started. Yes, it's going to cost more money to keep them heated. However, I would suggest that that's an opportunity for Canadians to step in and come up with some kind of much more efficient heating system for these greenhouses. And you may not get that in the first few that you build, but by the time you're ready to build out, 5 or 6 more across the country, you have a new heating system that is much more cost efficient and that can be retrofitted into the first batch that you put up for a nominal cost. Okay, that's that issue. That should not be a hill to climb at all. It's not like, oh, we can't do it because, no, tell me how we're going to do it. We can achieve it. And secondly, yes, your fruits and vegetables will be a little bit higher, but have you been paying attention to the cost of fruits and vegetables in the stores that we're importing from parts of the United States, Mexico, South America? Have you not been paying attention to how much you're paying now for fruits and vegetables? And this was happening when here in Canada, back in the fall, we were into the peak of our harvest across the country. So, again, it's going to cost more. Yes, it's going to cost more, but if we have a supply chain disruption somewhere in the world, which seems to be a common thing now,
Right.
Your prices go up through the roof. You have no control over it whatsoever. You want this. This is what the going price is because of the shortage. At least we can stabilize that and cut our dependency.
Absolutely. And you know what, Gary? I'd be willing to bet that the technology does exist out there. Literally, it does exist out there. It's just a question of taking best practices because, look, there are other countries that are effectively doing this and quite well. We're a very innovative country. We know how to do this. It's just a question of how willing is the government. I mean, I guess Prime Minister Carney's initiative here will actually to help to fund and develop and implement some of this technology that allows hothouses to operate all year round, right? So we don't have to bring our vegetables and fruits from Mexico and especially from the United States. I mean, we can if we can sustain our own logistics here and grow our own food, that will hopefully decrease prices, but certainly it'll prevent them from increasing exponentially as a result of one stupid thing happening on the planet or Mother Nature with COVID-19 getting in the way and creating issues, right? So I'm all for in-housing our own solutions where we don't have to depend on other nations to sustain ourselves, especially when it comes to food. And you talk quite eloquently about energy. How do we keep these hothouses warm during our winter climate? You know what? Look, I don't want to sound stupid, Gary, but if you look at the province of Quebec, that's got more hydropower than you know what to do with, all right? There's a subsidy for you. You open up a hothouse, we'll heat you for free in the winter. How does that sound? It doesn't cost them a damn thing. They're generating their hydropower through running water, which will continue to run today, tomorrow, and the day after. There is a perfect subsidy for that. Create a hothouse, get into farming industry, and we'll support your efforts. There's got to be some kind of change in thinking, Gary, in terms of supporting our farmers the way they should be supported by the governments. They're not getting enough support, I think, in my opinion. And here's a fantastic opportunity for every province to find some way for their farmers to be actively producing food all year round as opposed to waiting for season. And again, you know what, Gary? For season means the summer. What happened to the Maritimes last year in terms of the drought? Farmers were devastated out east. Well, you know what? That was their entire crop. That was their entire revenue stream, and they do nothing during the winter because they can't. Here's a great opportunity for the federal government and the provincial governments to sit together in a kumbaya session again and say, how are we going to grow crops 365 days a year? There's a wonderful project that I think any politician, doesn't matter what color, what cloth, would and should get behind with the adequate public pressure. And it's getting to a point now, Gary, where there should be significant public pressure. And you know what? Unfortunately, our votes may not necessarily count for something, but here's where this should become an election item and something on somebody's platform to be able to say, this is what we need to do, and this is what my government would do if we were in power. And the critic from that you put on earlier on, I agree with him, but I also disagree with him. He's asking for time frames. He's asking for exactly when and how much. Well, look, let's be reasonable. That's just political rhetoric on a microphone. The fact that he's saying we do need some timelines and timeframes, absolutely. I think this is something that can be done with cooperation amongst all provinces and the federal government at the table, where they can come up with a systemic timeline to say, look, this is where we're going to be in 3 years. Gary, this is not a problem that's going to be fixed overnight.
No.
Very similarly to the problem we had on segment one, the police chief is not going to fix the problem overnight. The problem has been identified, the root cause needs to be identified, and then fix it. This doesn't necessarily identify the root cause to the problem, okay? But what it does do, it actually preaches about a potential solution, and here's the money the Canadian government is going to throw in to push this forward, okay? And I think with getting everybody around the table, discussing this as a this is not a project thing to do, Gary. This is a national crisis. This is an emergency. You know what? Let's get the barriers down. We talked about trade barriers before. Get rid of these damn things that allow farmers to sell to different provinces, and let's get food to Canadians' tables. And this, so it will getting something in place now. Move forward with it and make it active after 2 or 3 years after a project plan, and then we should start seeing Canadians control, or Canada controls its own destiny in terms of grocery prices, as opposed to, well, we got to ship it in from overseas, we got to ship it in from the United States, and all of the costs, and the administration in the United States starts another war, and all of a sudden we can't afford fuel for the trucks to get the food to us here in Canada. So many things can happen, Gary. So absolutely. I'm really pleased with this particular program. We haven't seen all the details. The commitment is there. Let's get the provinces in on the project. Let's not just be, here, how much money are you going to give me? Get involved with your farmers.
Well, yeah, exactly. Definitely. Get the provinces involved. Okay, just popped a question into the chat regarding prices. Now, a couple of comments that have been coming up in the discussion. One is about a number of Walmarts were growing produce on the roofs of the Walmarts. We have a couple of the condo buildings right here in Griffintown doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, I don't remember seeing anything this past winter, but I know the previous winter there was an individual in one of the buildings, and I don't think it was that far away from us, Eddie, and he continued growing things on the roof of his condo building through the winter and actually harvesting. And they didn't have a greenhouse or any, but he rigged up some kind of a system to ensure that the ground area that he had planted had heat, and he documented it on Facebook, kept taking pictures of it and posting the pictures to Facebook. So it can be done. We've had a suggestion in the comments already too about go below ground, go below grade. And yes, it certainly would be warmer. And you could draw heat from the interior, the Earth's interior as well, to use for the greenhouses. So it's not a question of not being able to do it. It's just strictly a question of, okay, how do we do it and how quickly can we get started? So
Correct.
there's
Absolutely.
To me, it's important that we do this because we can no longer depend on, and not only our allies. Yes, I'm not saying that we can't depend on them. What I'm saying is that their areas from time to time may go through drought or an extremely wet growing season, which means they're done. And we can't count on them to supply anything. We have to start counting on ourselves, doing for ourselves. Now, that's one part of the strategy. The other part of it, which I found really interesting, is the $1 billion to establish independent food terminals and regional distribution hubs to bypass are you ready for this? The logistics networks of major grocery chains. And I watched an interview with the vice president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers. And he is welcoming this news with open arms. He said his group is really happy to hear this because what's happening is these smaller independent grocers, a lot of them in the smaller communities across the country, the only supply chain they have is through the Loblaws and the Sobeys and the Metros.
Right.
They end up having to buy a lot of their stock from them. That's why when you go into these stores, even though they're independently owned and operated, you're seeing like, President's Choice items or the Sobeys brand, which just escapes me now because it's been a while since I've been in a Sobeys store. But, you're seeing those house brands because they have to go to the major grocery chains and buy from them.
Supply chain.
Yeah. And guess what the markup is? Like they're hosing these independent grocers, which means that when they put it out on the shelves, they have to charge higher prices than what you and I are lucky to be paying in a larger area like this. And we're bitching about what we're paying. So can you imagine what folks in smaller areas without much choice, how they feel? So I think that I totally agree that this will set it up so that these independent grocers can get away from the
dependency on the bigger chains.
I guess I was looking for another phrase, but the dependency on the bigger chains, and perhaps be able to deliver much more fair prices to their customers as well. And it all works out in the long run because you can't tell me that Loblaws and Sobeys and the rest of them couldn't cut the prices a little bit more as to what they charge the independent grocers, who in a lot of cases are family operations or mom and pop operations, and still these big guys are going to make a profit.
Well, what comes to mind right now is, couldn't there be some additional legislation passed that if you look at these smaller communities with the mom and pop shops, even in major metropolitan areas like Montreal, when they demonstrate through their taxes that the revenue streams are only this much, that the major suppliers, the big retailers, your Sobeys, your IGAs, and Metros, uh, can't price gouge these poor people. I mean, I know it's anti-capitalist, but at some point, you got to have some sort of fair playing ground to encourage proper competition. And like you said, if these smaller operations have to depend on these big people supplying logistics chains, they'll never be able to sell competitively against these big chains. So maybe there should be some sort of legislation that forces them not to mark up, their wholesale cost to some of these smaller grocers to essentially put them out of business. Something's got to be done to control these uh, these enormous companies that just gouge retailers, and when they sell wholesale, they'll gouge these smaller mom and pop operations. It's just not right. It's just not right, Gary. It's
No.
terrible. It's, you know what? It's this just going to continuously get worse until the government step in. And you know what? I know our critics are going to say, well, you guys sound like communists, or you know what, this is just way out in left field. I'm sorry, this is not communism. Look up the dictionary and what that means. This is just basically us using our social programs widely to ensure fair competition. So people on very, very limited budgets can actually afford groceries for their families. This is what it's all about. It's not about stepping on the little guy. It's about helping the little guy, for crying out loud. Something's got to be done. And I really hope that at some point, some government is really going to put their foot down and say, this is what we need to do. Everybody listening, this is what we need to do. Let's do it. Either through, as you mentioned, growing our own produce 365 days a year, and reining in these huge changes that just make oodles and oodles and oodles of money, and it's never enough. And wiping out these smaller grocery stores because they can't compete. I mean, and then as a result, you're looking at these smaller communities. I mean, you go 300 miles up north, and a carton of milk is
Oh.
1 liter of milk is going to cost you $10, for crying out loud. That's ridiculous. So
Yep.
we've got to have a better way of doing this.
Well, even in Newfoundland and Labrador, getting supplies to the island and the price of groceries over on the Rock would cause you to just go because it's crazy as well. And then when you get into the northern parts of the country, just unreal. But you're right, like $10 for a jug of milk. That's their life. That's what they deal with on a daily basis, and it's the cost of getting the goods there for sure. And that's something that has to be looked at as well, which comes back to what we said last week when you look at a population cap idea. We're all cluttered down in the southern part of the country along the border, and we have areas of the country where it's not cost effective to establish a new city or a new town or a new village. It's just not cost effective because you're isolated. So, and also included in this program is an investment of $750 million directed to expand vertical farming and so on, and greenhouse systems to build year-round domestic crop capability. So it comes back around to, what we've been talking about. It can be done. It can be done. So, some of the challenges, by financing independent distribution infrastructure, the federal government is explicitly acknowledging that current market concentration limits price competition for independent grocers. So this will help to ease that for sure. And it is amazing when you look at it. According to the information we have, Canada currently imports approximately 88% of its fresh fruit and 72% of its fresh vegetables.
Wow,
So,
I didn't know that.
As a country, just even our fresh vegetables, with the farms we have in this country, we're only producing about 25, 26% of what we need. And that's in a good year. If you have a year with drought or a very, very wet summer, our percentage that we're producing falls significantly. So, yes, it may be expensive initially, as most things are when you start a project like this. But I see in the long run things leveling out once we reduce our dependency maybe to importing 25% of things.
Yeah.
You know, so transitioning a portion of this volume to domestic indoor facilities will require intense energy inputs, testing the long-term economic viability of the strategy. Well, it has to be there. It just has to be there. Now, the other thing that critics are bringing up is investing in physical agricultural hubs will not influence consumer grocery costs if regulatory bodies fail to address anti-competitive property controls and market practices across the broader retail sector. Very much so. And I hate to get involved, government getting involved in the free market. But the fact of the matter is, it has not, by taking a complete hands-off approach, and given some of the issues in different areas of this country, I think that we've allowed the marketplace to get away with highway robbery.
Yeah.
And because they aren't acting responsibly, then I think government has to step in and, as you were saying earlier, clip the wings.
Yeah, and just one footnote on your previous comment, when something, a drought or too much rain happens in Canada and the farmers can't produce for one reason or another, you don't think that our people down south don't stay actively tuned to what's happening to our weather patterns and what's happening to our farmers here in Canada? The moment a particular region that, maybe produces peaches or corn or vegetables and so on and so forth is actually struggling due to drought and whatnot, of course they're actually doing this and saying, okay, now's the time to raise the price for these people up there, even if we don't have to, because we want to make money and they're desperate for our produce, and they crank up the prices. It has nothing to do with logistics. It's just the fact that the vultures circle and say, hey, we got to make some money out of these poor people now. And that's
supply and demand.
Doing business.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We have the supply, they have the demand. So
yeah. Exactly. Oh,
let's get her rolling.
What a vicious circle.
yeah, for sure. But again, it's something like this is one of those issues, I think anyway, Eddie, that it's not a question of, we can't do this. It's a question of how we're going to do it, because we can do it. And yes, there will be challenges, but it can be done. And you just start thinking, look at in the conversation tonight in the comments about going below ground. It makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's our takeaway?
Well, Gary, our takeaway is taxpayers' billions will not cure retail food inflation without parallel regulatory crackdowns on grocery monopolies.